good evening, wherever you may be. Good morning, also. And welcome, Simon. Thanks for being here. I'm really glad to see you after a while. Today we have not our regular Gita session, but we're actually having our monthly guest special. So, how are you feeling to be back again?
Oh, I'm very excited. I've missed Ashram Talks very much whilst I was away in India. So very happy to be back, and especially for today. I This is a topic that I feel um, inspires me a lot on a personal level.
That's great. Actually, I also feel very excited about this topic because, well, first I was thinking that we have all had in a point of our lives somebody or maybe more than one person who actually inspired us, like in a teacher role, or maybe this person, changed our lives from their own example. And also because, well, I work as a teacher. I'm an English teacher, but to be honest, many times I've wondered how I can have a deeper impact on my students, especially because I'm in contact with this knowledge. And to be honest, most of the times I have no clue on how to transmit this to them beyond what we have to study in the classroom context. So I'm actually looking forward to it with enthusiasm.
Oh, that's great. It is such an interesting topic because the Bhagavad Gita is not just, it's of course well known as a spiritual text, but it's also one of the world's great reflections on teaching and on mentorship and also on the ethics of guidance. So that's the topic that we'll be exploring today.
Yeah, actually, as a devotee, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's the first time I hear that the Bhagavad Gita like is a an example on this, like because we will all talk about it talks about karma, it talks about the soul, it talks about who God is, or all of these five basic topics of the Gita we've heard. But like as something that actually teaches us on teaching, it's first time I hear that. So looking forward to it. And Simon, I'll just leave it to you. You can start diving into it.
So before beginning, usual, start with a Mangala Charanam, an auspicious invocation. Shalakaya Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Paramanandamadhavam. So in the last session, the last session with me, we looked at the meaning of this particular auspicious invocation verse. And so that would be, I think it was episode 101, if any of you are searching for it. The first verse is a beautiful verse because it uses the metaphor of a physician, that a skilled teacher is like a physician. So let's turn now to this particular topic of teachers and teaching methods in the sacred texts of India. And here we're focusing on the Bhagavad Gita. So the entire text is structured as a teaching encounter between two friends, one in crisis and one capable of guidance. And of course, what makes this especially relevant is that Krishna is not a kind of professional teacher, so to speak. He is Arjuna's friend, companion, and charioteer. So why does that matter? It matters because teaching in life often happens informally. So a parent speaking to a child, a friend giving advice, a mentor guiding someone younger, a manager leading a team, for example. So at some point, we all become a teacher. So the question is, how do we teach in a way that genuinely helps people grow? And the Bhagavad Gita offers some profound answers. So I have a little exercise, like a reflection for those of you watching. So I want to invite you to pause for a moment and to think of a teacher, a mentor, a parent, a friend who genuinely changed your life. And I would like to ask you to consider for a moment what made this person different. Was it their knowledge? Maybe their kindness? The way they listened? The way they believed in you? Maybe the way they challenged you? The way they made you feel seen? So the Bhagavad Gita suggests that great teaching is not merely a transfer of information, but rather it's an ability to help another person become more fully themselves. So we'll have a look at some of the teaching methods that Sri Krishna uses in the Bhagavad Gita as he turns to his friend Arjuna and helps him through his crisis. So the first one is that great teachers do not give unsolicited advice. So one of the most striking things about the Gita is that Krishna doesn't immediately begin preaching. In fact, at the beginning of the text, Arjuna is doing all of the talking and Krishna is listening. And he allows Arjuna to speak, to unravel, to express his confusion, his grief, his fear, his moral conflict. And then only, and some of you will remember this if you've been watching Ashram Talks from the beginning. So only when, only in chapter 2, like verse 7, then Arjuna says, Karpanya dosho pahata svabhava prichami tvam dharma samudachetaha. So at that point, Arjuna turns to Krishna and says, look, Krishna, I'm completely confused. I don't know what to do and what not to do. Please become my teacher. Please help me. And it's only then that that Krishna begins speaking. So Krishna doesn't force himself into the role of a teacher. He waits to be invited. And that, I think, is deeply important. Often we're eager to give advice, but far fewer of us are willing to listen deeply enough to understand the person before speaking. And sometimes, or often, people need space to articulate what they are actually struggling with. And here the Gita is teaching something powerful. Teaching begins with listening. A second attribute of Krishna as a teacher is that great teachers, they choose their students carefully. So towards the end of the Gita, Krishna says something surprising. And for those of you who are interested in the Gita on a detailed level, this is chapter 18, text 67. Krishna says you should never share this teaching. So the yoga teachings of the Gita that Krishna shares with Arjuna, Krishna says one should never share those teachings to someone who, and he gives a list of qualities. For example, someone who lacks self-discipline, atapakskaya, to someone who's unwilling to listen sincerely, ashushrushave, or abhyasuyati, someone who's hostile. So Krishna, he's actually at the very end, he tells Arjuna different qualities of a student for those particular yoga teachings. So Krishna recognizes that transformative knowledge requires certain qualities in the listener: humility, openness, sincerity, a willingness to change. So we see that in the Gita through the how to put this, you have two students in a way who are listening both from their charioteers. You have Arjuna, who is the paradigmatic student, and he's listening to the teachings of yoga from Krishna on the battlefield, but the same teachings are being conveyed to the blind emperor Dhritarashtra by his charioteer, Sanjaya. So Sanjaya is a minister, but he's also the charioteer of Dhritarashtra. And Arjuna hears directly, so Arjuna is hearing directly from Krishna. The same Gita is being heard by Dhritarashtra from Sanjaya. But the results are radically different. Why? Because Arjuna is genuinely wants truth, even if it challenges him, whilst Dhritarashtra wants confirmation of his attachments. So this is an important insight for teachers, parents, mentors, leaders. We cannot help someone who is fundamentally unwilling to see as a teacher. So a teacher cannot do inner work. A teacher cannot do the inner work for another person. It requires a willingness on the part of the student. So this second attribute of a teacher is in some ways very much connected or flows from the first one. Number 3, the best teachers teach from affection, not from ego. So one aspect of the Gita that I find particularly, I'll even say beautiful, is the relationship between Krishna and Arjuna. So Krishna says in chapter 4, text 3, which is a text that we looked at not too long ago, because we're actually in chapter 4 at the moment. Krishna says, "You are my devotee and my friend." So this is not cold instruction. It's guidance that's rooted in care. A true teacher wants the student to flourish. And there's one famous verse, which is a Sanskrit verse, which is attributed to Shiva, who's speaking to Parvati. And he says, many are the gurus. Guru is simply another word for teacher. It's the Sanskrit word for teacher. Many are the gurus who steal the wealth of their students. Rare is the guru who steals away their suffering. So it's a remarkable definition of a teacher. A genuine teacher is not trying to dominate or to impress or to create dependency or to build a following. So rather, we see here that Krishna is trying to free Arjuna from confusion and paralysis. He wants Arjuna to become empowered. So this is one of the great ethical lessons of the Gita. Teaching should emerge from concern for the well-being of the student, not from the ego of the teacher. So moving on to, if we have time, let's see how many we can cover. Let's see. So number 4, great teachers do not remove human freedom or human agency. So we see at the end of the Gita, after 18 chapters of teaching, Krishna says something extraordinary. Those of you who are interested, it's chapter 18, text 63. He says, Vimrishyaitad asheshena yatechasi tatakuru. Reflect deeply on this and then do as you wish. So this is one of the most psychologically mature moments in world literature. Krishna doesn't demand obedience. He doesn't say submit blindly, turn off your intelligence, stop thinking. Instead, he says reflect, deliberate, think deeply, and then choose responsibly. So Krishna's not teacher. He teaches Arjuna without taking away Arjuna's agency. And that's a mark of a great teacher. Manipulative teachers, they create dependency. Authentic teachers strengthen discernment. And the goal is not to produce a compliant follower. The goal is to help people discover, is to help people become capable of wise and responsible action. Now, related to this is another important attribute of a teacher. Great teachers embody what they teach. So I'll give you a few examples here. The Gita repeatedly emphasizes embodied wisdom. So Krishna doesn't merely speak philosophy, he lives it. So for example, Krishna teaches action without attachment. And he himself teaches without attachment to the outcome. As we saw, he, having explained 18 systems of yoga to Arjuna, he then says, Arjuna, I leave it now to your choice. Do what you think is best. So in a way, this is extraordinary. Many people, they teach principles they themselves do not embody. So calmness without being calm, discipline without discipline, humility without humility. But the Gita insists that wisdom is not merely informational, but it's transformational. And Krishna is referred to in the Gita as Yogeshwara, the master of yoga. So he embodies mastery over the mind, senses, and action. So someone may know many things intellectually. I may know many things intellectually, for example, whilst remaining inwardly untransformed. And the Gita here is teaching that people are ultimately taught not so much by our words, but by our very being, by who we are as a person. Number 6, great teachers know how to speak. They know how to communicate. So I don't know if we'll have time for this, but those of you who are interested, chapter 17, text 15, Krishna describes discipline of speech. Anudvega karam vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat. So he explains here 4 doorways of speech. Our words should be truthful. They should be pleasing or coming from a kind place. They should be beneficial, and they should not be agitating to the listener. So this is actually incredibly relevant today. A lot of the communication that we engage in is actually on the internet, through social media platforms. And all too often we see the opposite of these 4. We see communication, especially in the comments section, that's extremely agitating, often not truthful, not coming from a kind place, and not beneficial. So Krishna's here teaching something that is just very important in developing communication skills. We may excuse harshness in the name of truth, or otherwise we may avoid truth in the name of kindness. And Krishna here refuses both extremes. Speech should be true, but also constructive, careful, compassionate. So it's about timing, tone, sensitivity, psychological awareness. I'm wondering if I should introduce an exercise here. Let's move on, because we'll cover the 4 gateways of speech another time, I feel. Especially as we come to chapter 17. We'll have a look at this in great detail. And I'm really looking forward to that. So number 7, great teachers, they honor tradition while teaching in fresh ways. So that's one remarkable feature of the Gita, is that Krishna repeatedly roots his teachings in tradition. He's often referring to lineage, which in Sanskrit is known as parampara. So he presents teachings as ancient wisdom, and yet at the same time, the Gita is deeply innovative. Krishna, for example, he's redefining familiar concepts. What is yoga? He gives different definitions of yoga. Usually, the accepted understanding of yoga in the tradition of Patanjali is that yoga is about disengagement with the world. I mean, the very definition of yoga in the Yoga Sutras is about stilling the mind, subduing the fluctuations of the mind. Krishna here, so one would not think that it's about being active in everyday life. The traditional yogini, they go to the forest or to the mountains or at the edge of the village, and they practice mostly alone or in small communities of ascetics. But Krishna here teaches something something surprising. Yoga karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is skillfulness in action. So it's not abandoning the world, but acting in the world, but in the most skillful way. Or Krishna in chapter 13, he looks at what is knowledge. And we have an idea of what knowledge is, but Krishna redefines it in a way that is very innovative and catches you by surprise. Knowledge is not what we remember and what we've committed to memory and what we can repeat. Rather, knowledge becomes humility, honesty, self-restraint, compassion, steadiness. And then Krishna finishes his list and says everything else apart from this is actually a lack of knowledge, ajnana. So Krishna is teaching in a very innovative way, but he's teaching, the essence of what he's teaching comes from a very long and sacred tradition. We'll fit in a few more. Number 8, great teachers aim at transformation, not mere information. So in a way, we've looked at this already. This may be the deepest pedagogical insight in the Gita. Krishna is not merely trying to inform Arjuna, but he's trying to transform him. So at the beginning, Arjuna collapses psychologically. He drops his bow, he becomes overwhelmed. And we see at the end of the Gita, clarity returns. Memory is restored. Action becomes possible again. So the teaching changes his consciousness, his state of awareness. And to do that, Krishna uses many methods. We don't have time to go into them in detail, although I wish we could, but he uses vivid imagery, paradox, symbolism, emotional intensity, reframing, repetition. We'll see he uses escalating levels of revelation. So Krishna employs various methods, and we see them within the text, to create a transformation in Arjuna as a pupil. Number 9, great teachers, they know how to generate wonder and eagerness. So Krishna, in the Gita, he speaks about different levels of secrecy. So some of his teachings are guya, which means secret. Some are guyatara, more secret. And then guyatama, the most secret. And then sarva guyatama, the most secret of all. We find this also in the Upanishads, different levels of confidential teachings or secrecy. So yes, there are different layers of teachings, and some of them are more confidential than others. But at the same time, Krishna is making this hierarchy not to try to say to Arjuna that these teachings are not for you. The idea rather is, it's pedagogically brilliant. Krishna's creating anticipation and eagerness. He wants the listener to feel that something profound is about to be revealed and that there's an eagerness for it. And in a way, that eagerness is the quality that's required to move to that next level of confidence, of secrecy. So great teachers, they know how to do this naturally. They awaken curiosity. They make the knowledge, you can say, feel alive, precious, and transformative. It's not dry or mechanical. Now, here's another key point. Great teachers speak universally. So one of the reasons that the Bhagavad Gita continues to resonate globally is that it operates symbolically as well as historically. So there are different dimensions that coexist in the text. And some of the commentators like Sri Madhvacharya have spoken about this. So there is also a symbolic dimension. So the field of action, the battlefield is known as Kurukshetra. And as a reader of the Gita, we are not to think that it's simply a geographical place. It is a geographical place. with a long history, but it also has a symbolic meaning. Kshetra means field, Kuru comes from Kri, which means to do. So it's the field of action. We are all on the field of action. And that's precisely why the Bhagavad Gita is as relevant to Arjuna. It's as relevant to us as it is to Arjuna, because we are also on the battlefield of human decision, the field of moral conflict, the field of action, the field of the present moment. We're faced with the same dilemmas, how to act skillfully on this field. So the same or similar dilemmas to the one faced by Arjuna. So you can say the Gita is speaking simultaneously to warriors, to parents, to leaders, to seekers, to professionals, to students. And that universality is one mark of enduring teaching. And we have time for one more. And I think this one is very important, and it's a really good one to conclude. The best teachers, what do? The best teachers, they create more teachers. So at the end of the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna to share these teachings with qualified people. And this is profound. Krishna doesn't want to create some kind of permanent dependence. He wants transmission. So he wants Arjuna himself to become a guide for others. And perhaps this is one of the clearest signs of authentic teaching. Insecure teachers create followers. Great teachers, they create teachers. So to sum up, the Bhagavad Gita presents teaching not as domination or performance or even information transfer. Teaching is presented as, number one, an ethical responsibility, an act of care, a form of service, and a process of awakening. Krishna listens before speaking. He respects freedom. He teaches affection. He teaches from affection. He embodies what he teaches. He communicates skillfully, and he seeks transformation rather than dependence. And perhaps this is why the dialogue continues to speak across centuries. Because at its heart, the Gita is not merely asking, what should we know? Rather, it's asking, how do we help human beings become who they are capable of becoming? And that may be the deepest task of every true teacher. So we'll stop here. Maybe I can finish with an exercise. Subhadra, do we have time for an exercise, do you think? Or do we? Okay. Let's finish with that. So I'm going to ask you, those of you watching, to consider for a moment who in your, and you could, if you wanted to, you could like take a little card and just jot this down as you reflect on this. Who in your life are you already teaching? Whether you realize it or not. So you may be like Subhadra and be an English teacher and have actually formally have students. But if you don't, you may be teaching in other ways that you might not fully realize. So you may be teaching your children. There may be moments of teaching with friends, colleagues, perhaps your online presence, your example, your habits, your speech. So who in your life are you already teaching, whether you realize it or not? So spend just a few moments taking some notes on that. And then once you've had a chance to jot a few things down, then the next question is, what are you teaching people through the way you live? That's a difficult one. That requires a lot of self-reflection. What are we teaching people through the way we live? So by the way we live, I mean our words, our actions, our thoughts. Actions, we can think of our habits. And then finally, the final part of this little exercise, this little reflection, is If someone learned how to live by watching you closely for 1 month, what would they learn? I'll repeat that. If someone learned how to live by watching you closely for 1 month, what is it that they would learn? So this particular exercise, this reflection, it does a few things. One, it considers the role that we have as teachers, which may even at times be invisible to ourselves. And then the next two follow-on questions ask us to look deeply, not just at the information that we convey when we're teaching, but also the extent to which we embody that, and what kind of example do we provide. So we see here that teaching, being a teacher and being a student are inextricably woven into each other, to the degree that we become a qualified student. According to the sacred texts of India, we become eligible to teach. So teaching and learning become inextricably connected. And we see that some of the verses, beautiful verses in various texts like the Bhagavata Purana, they define the teacher and the student within the same verse. 2 lines giving the qualities of a student, two lines giving the quality of a true teacher, because they're so interconnected. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this particular episode. There's a lot more to say. It's a fascinating topic, and we find these teachings just embedded in the verses of the Gita.
Thank you so much, Simon, for sharing this. And you make me ask myself so many things. Like, I don't even know. I just noted down everything you said, like each point, so maybe we can share these bullet points later on an Ashram Talks post, because I think they would be really useful for everybody. And okay, so first, to know that the way you presented Krishna as a teacher by being the personification of all of these, the embodiment of all of these points, like somebody who does this, who teaches this way, yeah, everything you said while presenting who is a great teacher, and also Krishna being that teacher, makes me think that I think we lost your.
I
uh,
apologize for that. Yeah, let me see if I can just change
that
that.
that's fine. Okay, that's okay. Well, so well, maybe will you work on that? I don't know if you mind if I.
Yeah, please
um
continue.
okay. So then makes me think that um so like teachers are so important. It's like, this figure, this role of a teacher is everything in this world. It made me think also of my spiritual master. Once or many times he said, especially for us human beings, souls who are in a human body, we have this chance to learn spirituality. For us, teachers are like our everything, and in all stages of our lives, we learn everything from others, and also at some point of our lives, we're put in the position of teaching others by words or by example. And on the last part, you mentioned that um, what could, in the reflection, the exercise, like what would others learn from us if they had to learn from us by watching us closely. And it also made me remember of a question I asked a devotee in Ashram Talk Spanish a few months ago, because um, I always struggled with this, that I told you at the beginning, that I don't know how to, give this knowledge to other people in a swift way. I'm not that. I don't consider myself like a good preacher. So I asked him, what could I do? Because teaching others is really important, as you mentioned. A good teacher creates other teachers, and Krishna is hoping Arjun to share this knowledge. Ah, there you are again. To share this knowledge with others, but at the same time, you mentioned that okay, so we don't give unsolicited advice, or we have to choose carefully who we give this knowledge to. And also, well, he said about that question, like, okay, maybe you're not good at approaching somebody and saying, okay, like, the traditional preaching. This is Bhagavad Gita. Would you like to know a little bit more about this or that? But if you're teaching them by what you do, maybe you're vegetarian, or yeah, you have your sadhan, you have yeah, a way of, as you said, strategically living life, then through that example, it could also be considered preaching. So I don't know exactly what the question is, but I was thinking that when we take the role of teachers, there is a lot of in what we share. There is a lot of not only what we receive, but the way we understood it. And based on how we understood what we received from others, that's what we're going to give
Yeah.
to others.
Right.
And in many cases, in my personal experience, I've um, I've experienced this thing that trying to teach others, or more than teaching, to force others into how I think things are done, more than giving them their own freedom, and also like trying to root too much into tradition, like it's almost rotten instead of rooted. So I think it's like a whole art we are all invited to learn, because our own preconceptions are going to get in the way. I don't know what you think about this.
I love what you've just said. I love what you've just said because you have in many ways encapsulated some of the key points of how Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad Gita, and yes, how we approach a particular text, and to the extent that what we learn from it ourselves is as much as we're actually able to teach. And sometimes also we pick up things from the text that are not in the text. That's important as well. It just becomes like perhaps a misunderstanding of the text, or we're imposing our own current way of looking at the world onto the text. So there's a philosopher named Gadamer who speaks about that. He speaks about what he calls a fusion of horizons. We have an historically affected consciousness. What he means by that is that our way of looking at the world is embedded in history, and a particular way at this point in time of how we look at the world, what we consider important. And when we approach a sacred text like the Bhagavad Gita, there's a fusion of horizons. There's the horizon of the text, but we cannot help but read the text through the lens in which we look at it, which sometimes that's a helpful thing, because the text will then change our vision. But sometimes we place onto the text our own way of looking at things. I can give some examples of that, but I don't know if we have time. So it requires very attentive, careful study of a text, being aware of that. And we may bring misconceptions to a text. Like I'll give you a very quick example. Very often, Sanskrit texts will borrow verses from older texts. So, for example, the Upadeshamrita, that nectar of instruction that many bhakti practitioners are familiar with, the first 4 verses Sri Rupa Goswami takes them from other sources, and either makes a small change, or even in some cases uses the verse exactly as it is. And the sources are very surprising sources, very surprising where they come from, like you wouldn't expect it. And someone from our time might be a little bit disturbed by that. Like, why Are we using verses that are just borrowed without giving credit? So we have this idea that we come with a lot of baggage. For example, this idea, the taboo against plagiarism, for example. In academia, that's so important. But those are ideas that were created in the Western world fairly recently. In ancient India, there's no idea of having ownership over knowledge. Knowledge is only valuable because it's universal. You don't produce knowledge. Knowledge production is not a thing. It's only revealed. And if it has any value, it's because it's revealed, and it's knowledge that's eternal. That's how knowledge is viewed. But it's very different to the way we look at knowledge today. So you encounter this again and again. We have even, within societies that we're in, and within even religious organizations that we might be part of, there might be certain ways of living or certain ideas that we then force onto a text. That can happen as well. So to read carefully, of course, very helpful and important to be to approach these texts under the guidance of a teacher who has grasped the essence of those teachings, and then that can help us also grasp the essence without being caught up by things that are not that are not so important. The essence is really what it's about. And as a final comment, I want to say that that's how Krishna is roots the teachings in tradition, but is able to present them in an innovative way. Why? Because it's the essence that he's presenting to a new generation. That requires real, not just information, but actual transformation of one's very being to be able to do that. To be able to present teachings in a way that's innovative and that meets the needs of the time without losing the essence.
Yeah, that's something that we've seen great teachers have done through history, and many of them have been criticized for it.
Right.
But yeah. And I think there's a question here by Deborosco, and I think it brings some key points to the discussion. He says, Haribol Prabhu, you mentioned that great teachers encourage us to use discernment. How can we sincerely understand whether our discernment is arising from a place of sincerity rather than from the ego?
Right. No, it's a very good question. Thank you for that. It very much, you can tell, how does the adage go? I forget how this particular adage goes, but it's you know whether a cake is good when you eat it. It's in. We can know whether our discernment is something that's worthy and something that is valuable by the results we get from it. So if our discernment is reducing the suffering in our life, that's one level. There are other levels as well, but I'm going to start just there. If our discernment is creating less chaos, less suffering coming from suffering related to time, so fear, lamentation, and confusion. That's what Arjuna is faced with. He's faced with fear, which is suffering related to the future, confusion, suffering related to the present, lamentation, suffering related to the past. He speaks about those in chapter 1. And he speaks about his grief. He speaks about his fear of what's going to happen in the future. He expresses his confusion. So that's the dominant way in which we live our life. It's why Dhritarashtra starts off the Gita with a verse that's filled with fear, lamentation, and confusion. And we can know by the fruits, by the results of our discernment. If our discernment is removing fear, lamentation, and confusion, we can have confidence in it. If what we think might be discernment is increasing our anger and increasing our disturbed mind, and clouding our awareness, then it's a discernment that's not serving us. It's false.
Thank you, Simon. And that was a great answer, also a great question. And I think it's a question that it's very common among practitioners. I remember having, or I was in the middle of a conversation with other devotees, and it's a very common question. Like we ask ourselves, how do we know when we're doing things in a right way rather than it? How do we know it's not our ego that's in the middle of everything? And in one of those conversations, a devotee said, like, oh, you know, like it's in, it's inside of you. And I thought, okay, yes, but sometimes we may also want to trick ourselves into doing
Right.
it
Yeah.
regardless. So it's also good to have this, like this advice. You can evaluate the results, but I think in any case, it's important to sit and reflect on what happened, and yeah, to take a moment to take a look at what's happening, so we can actually see
To
if
add,
it's from the right place or not.
if we're practicing a particular path, so say we're practicing the path of Bhakti Yoga, it is helpful to have a teacher who can, especially initially, give us, let us know what to expect. The sacred texts also tell us there are particular landmarks of experience. We will experience this, we'll experience that next. We become free from these distractions and so on. Quite specific, the sacred texts in the Bhakti tradition, they set out a pathway. And to have, so it's a little bit like if you're walking, going on a journey through the mountains, to have a guide who knows that path really well is extremely important and is encouraged. But ultimately, the student will also experience these things themselves.
As you said, teachers cannot create. They cannot do the inner work for the other. So we need both things. Someone who guides us, but also a lot depends on whether we accept the guidance and really want to go for it.
It's a big topic, isn't it?
It is, yes. I'd like to say and discuss a lot more about it, but I think we can then close here. I don't know if you'd like to say something to conclude.
I am thinking that, well, I would like to say that what I might try to do is, depending on the interest, so I want to see if what comments there are for this particular episode. But if there's interest, we can go into this in even greater detail and more on a personal level as well. I would like share some of my own personal experiences and just go into this in greater detail in another special session, perhaps.
That reminds me that once we had it was kind of a special session with one of our speakers, because a question arose during the regular Bhagavad Gita lesson, but we couldn't address it. But then we had it was like something completely out of the regular schedule. And it was like entirely conversational. So it was asking and answering questions during the whole session. So maybe we could plan something like that if our listeners are interested. And if you have time.
I think it sounds great.
Okay, so we'll talk about it. And we'll definitely share the bullet points of today's class so everyone can expect to see them soon in our Instagram account. Thank you so much, Simon, for this great discussion. It's always a pleasure to share this time with you.
Thank you, Subhadra. Thank you so much.
And yeah, yes, I guess I'll see you then on our next Ashram Talks session next Monday then. Well, sorry. Thank you everybody for joining. And yes, so we'll let you know whether we're going to be holding this special session. We have some comments showing interest here. So thank you so much for supporting Ashram Talks, and see you on Thursday. I will be letting you know about the session then afterwards. Thank you so much. Goodbye.